Welcome back to the Zero eMichigan podcast. I'm Carl Bloss, and with me is my co-host, Larry Hudson. Apologies that we did not have a podcast last week. I was on a road trip for a funeral public service announcement. This person died from colon cancer at a very young age, so get your colonoscopy, get your tests, your diagnostics. It's just not worth waiting on these things. Without further ado, I wanted to talk about the North American charging system, NACS, also known as the Tesla charger. Now, everybody and their brother seems to be talking about this, and I don't want to repeat some of those things. In fact, there are some really great YouTube videos out there. Larry pointed out to me the one from 2-Bit Da Vinci, and we'll put that in the show notes. But if you look up 2-Bit Da Vinci Tesla charger, he really does a great deep dive. By the way, he's a chemical engineer, which I am, so go chemies. And then the other one is from Kyle at Out of Spec Motoring. He does a very deep dive, as he always does, and goes into some of the weeds of some of the protocols and things like that. So I certainly don't want to replicate that, but I think we do, between us, have a couple things to talk about and what all this means. So there are a couple of distinct topics I want to talk about. So the first is the connector itself. This is just hardware. Then I want to talk about the Tesla supercharging network and what that entails, and a little bit about how its use is. And then I want to dive into the charging station experience, how it is now, how it is for Tesla. I own one of each vehicle, a Tesla, a non-Tesla, and then go into some of the ramifications, kind of where is the industry going now, and what is some of the fallout that we're expecting to see. The connector itself, I have here in front of me the Tesla J1772 adapter. So the end of this is kind of what goes into the charge port of every Tesla. So every Tesla, by the way, comes with one of these. So for level 2 charging, the J1772, which is the other North American standard for level 2 charging, this is easily connected for Teslas. And I should also say that it's also easily done the other way around. So this is a Tesla tap, where you go into a Tesla charging cord, but it's only the AC, the alternating current. So the home charger and the destination charger.
That's it, destination.
Yeah. The destination charger, or the charging cable, the mobile connector. So this does not work on the Tesla supercharger, because the other end of it is just this J1772. So this is AC only. So my point here really is, for level 2 charging, the solution is already there. So to me, all this discussion about needing adapters and needing to retrofit is kind of a non-issue. So if you are the charging host for a level 2 charger that has the J1772, don't worry about it. Tesla and Ford and GM and whoever is using the NACS in the future, this is a $50 part, and it probably will come with the vehicle, so that people will be able to charge. If you have a Tesla destination charger, people can pick up one of these. They're anywhere from $100 to like $300 for some of the high amp. This is a high amp version, and also a very compact one that I carry on my Zero motorcycle. So that solution is already out there.
How long have you had those, and are they durable?
So this is actually my original one. This is the one that came with my 2015 Tesla.
And so it's got like years of use.
It's got years of use. And now I don't use it every day necessarily. And then the other thing that I did is I picked up a second one. I keep one in my car so that I always have one for public chargers. But I do have a home charger that's a J1772. So I use it with that. And then, of course, I don't plug it and unplug it every day. I keep it in the charger, just charge the Tesla that way. So yeah, these are pretty durable. And again, worst case, $50, you buy another one of these. The one that's the other way around, I've used it a couple dozen times for Tesla destination chargers. One of my favorite locations is Storm Cloud Brewing. So shout out to them in Frankfurt, up at the north end of M22. So comes in super handy. But I think what people are really talking about is the DC. So the CCS is DC fast charging. One of the things that 2-Bit Da Vinci, he went into a little detail, is the fact that the Tesla charger, if you notice, there are only the 5 connectors in here, both for AC and DC. And that's because the vehicle itself does the switching internally. When you have AC power, there's basically a switch that routes it through the rectification circuit, so the actual charger to make it from AC to DC. And when you connect to a Tesla supercharger, then you bypass the charger and you go directly into the battery. So that's what allows them to be this small, and you don't have an extra set of two
That
big
blows my
honking.
mind. I just think that's so
Yeah, that's a
amazing.
really, really great
And
design.
that one just like blew my mind. So when I knew it could do it, I I I just didn't know that it would, but it's been doing it for years. And we had the other podcast with Ben on the live wire, and he'd mentioned, can you imagine one day all the plugs are the same, just like at a gas station, and then you choose level 1, level 2, or supercharge, which is DC, and you never have to switch the cords.
I think the lack of standardization is what's really hurting all of this right now. And once all these makers can decide and agree that, okay, we're all going to go with CCS or MCS or whatever the charging nozzle is going to be, once that happens, I think it'll really change. Imagine, like with you, Carl, pulling up to a charging station. You still have a CCS plug. Maybe it doesn't use CCS. It just still uses the J1772.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, okay, I want to charge at a level 1 rate, and you select level 1. Or I want to charge at a level 2 rate, and you select level 2. Or I want to charge at a level 3 rate, and then I can charge at a level 3 rate. But it's just one station, just like a gas pump.
Right.
And
so the car communicates with the charger, and it will know, is this AC or DC, and then the car knows what to do, and it switches it internally. So.
And I had another thought too that's a little off, but like you're going to charge and you're like, I'm just going to dinner and a movie, so I want to do level 1 because I want to be here for 3 hours and not move my car. And then, I'm traveling, I want to get in and out of here, so I'm supercharging, right? So that might be another kind of cool benefit we might have in the future.
Well, somebody would have to come up with the charger itself, the offboard charger that is able to do all of those. So I mean, that's a separate discussion, but the point is the car can do it. You just have to send it the right signals, and it'll switch it accordingly. So the other thing to think about is that this thing is just a connector. It's just like CHAdeMO, or it's like CCS. And yes, there are communications protocols behind it, like we just talked about, but all of these can be made compatible through adapters. So Tesla has sold a CHAdeMO adapter, which is the other DC fast charging standard that came out of Japan that's now all but defunct, except for some Nissan Leafs running around and some Mitsubishis. So they've had that adapter since the mid 2010s. I bought my CHAdeMO adapter in the May of 2015. So adapting between those is really not that much of a challenge. Tesla now has a CCS adapter so that you can charge your Tesla on the CCS network. So really going the other way around, I mean, Tesla's already shown this with their superchargers for non-Teslas, where they have a captive adapter, the so-called magic dock. So just through adapters, you can make all this stuff happen. So really, this is just nuts, bolts, wires, connectors, that sort of thing. So
but in the long run, right, I think it's huge, though, that we're going to be able to, go in, no screens to touch, no cards.
Well, that's a separate discussion. So let me just finish with the hardware. Okay. So that's really it, right? So what does this mean? I think and this kind of goes jumping ahead into the ramifications. So if I'm a generic charging network that currently has, one cable with a CHAdeMO and one cable with a CCS, then I want to add the Tesla, the NACS. I want to add a cable with that, right? As long as I can deliver the power and I can communicate with the car, I would be a fool not to have that, because there are so many Teslas out there, and there's going to be so many other vehicles out there now that are going to have that. Then I want to make that as easy as possible for my customers, right? So that's really the first thing. So surprise, surprise, I wrote these notes yesterday, and this morning I opened my news and it says Blink and ChargePoint. In the meantime, I've seen others have just announced that they're doing exactly that, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So boom, right away they said, okay, we're going to start adding cables. I think EVgo's been doing it for some time already. But now let's talk about what you're talking about, Larry. Part of the appeal of using the Tesla supercharging network is the fact that it's so reliable, and it's the biggest, and it's redundant. Every time you pull up to a supercharger station, there's typically 8, 10, 12. I'm seeing 20 charging columns, and so they're redundant. So if one of them's broken, then you just move to the next one. And that's really part of what's driven the appeal to Teslas. It's not that everybody loves Elon Musk, but it's that they just work. So I
They're
just got back.
bulletproof, yeah.
They're foolproof. And then the other part of that, why is it so reliable, is they don't have a screen. They don't have any kind of activation mechanism. You don't have to tap an RFID card.
Right.
There's no credit card reader.
It's all done in the back office,
It's
so
all in
to
the
speak.
back. There's not even an LED, right? There's not even like a little
Right.
red or green that says online, offline. There's absolutely nothing. There's just a cable
The
hanging on this
car,
thing,
yeah.
and you plug your car in, and it just starts charging. Now,
But you do have lights on the car, so you know as you're standing out there, oh, it went green. I
yes,
know I'm charging.
and that's really the point, is that everything that happens on the car and it happens on the app. Okay, so when you plug in, there's a little light next to the charge port on the car that it first turns blue and flashes, and that tells you it's communicating, like it's starting to talk to the car. The charging station is starting to talk to the car. They're syncing up, they're figuring it out, making sure that you have an account with them, that you have a valid credit card attached to them, that sort of thing. And when it starts flashing green, you know it's charging. Now you can walk away. You don't have to look at your screen anymore. You don't have to look at your app. You just go inside your coffee shop, your store, whatever. You know it's charging.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's
and then
huge, though.
The
That
rest of
is
the
huge
information,
right there.
it is huge. Now, I typically look at my screen anyway because I want to see how many kilowatts am I getting. I have had it happen where one of the stations didn't deliver the power level that I would expect. Or the other thing is, with one of the original superchargers, you were sharing power. If there was a 1A and a 1B, and you went on 1B, and there's a car on 1A, then you're sharing the power. And so I wanted to see what the power level that I was getting. And if there's another one that's opened up, I would actually move the car.
But that's just nerding out, right? That's you personal.
We're getting into the weeds, right? But that's the level of simplicity that the Supercharger network has. And I think that's a huge part of the appeal, that everybody else wants a part of this, right? So the connector part, the fact that it's simple and elegant, Aptera is actually the ones, and Da Vinci, 2-bit Da Vinci pointed this out. They actually lobbied for this because their car is, or their vehicle is so
small in the back. Yeah, motorcycle blade, right?
And they wanted to put their charge connector behind the license plate, which the license plate is the size of a motorcycle license.
Right.
So to put a CCS connector in there is just really, it doesn't work. So they're like, okay, this is what we want. So they're the ones that put that out there. But now, you know, Ford and GM and everybody else is there. I think they're starting to recognize that if the reliability of the network isn't there, if the user experience isn't there, then people aren't going to buy the car, no matter how good the car is, right?
Man, I would love to know how that happened in the back office with GM. I was really surprised to hear them, you know, within a couple days, week. I'm like, wow, how did they get them convinced? Now I saw
Ford. It's Domino's, right? I mean, not Domino's Pizza, but you know, one domino fell.
But was there like all hands the minute Ford announced it? Was GM already talking? Did someone say, hey, just to let you know, we're jumping on with Tesla? So they already were working on it behind? Or did GM hear it on the news like we all did? And then they had emergency meetings and people are up all night negotiating, and you know,
be fun to be a fly on the wall of that one, right?
That's what I was trying to wonder.
But I mean, that's kind of how standards work, right? So at some point, everybody jumps on board. Now, strictly speaking, the organization that creates the standard for CCF, they've recently come out and said, well, look, the North American Charging Standard isn't a true standard, right? There aren't like engineering standards behind it. And I think that's all going to change. They're going to work that out. But, you know, strictly speaking, of course, they're a little bit in defensive mode. But I understand that as an engineer myself. I understand the importance of standard. Like, you don't want to have something that's like a little off, because then some vehicles won't be able to charge. So they do want to get all that right. Now, let's talk about the charging station experience. We already talked about, you know, you literally pull up, you open your charge port, you plug in, it starts charging, right? And so then everything is all the information is on the car or on the app. that's part of the reason why the Tesla Supercharger is so much cheaper to implement, right? There was some discussion about,
Yeah.
the fact that Tesla is able to roll these things out at a much lower price point. Now, part of that is also because they own the vehicles, not, I mean, they know the vehicles, they own everything about the hardware, the software, and so everything is seamless, kind of like Apple, right? In a way, and Two-Bit Da Vinci mentioned this as well. They have the
Which I
hardware, they have the
didn't.
software, they have the
Right.
connectors, so all that stuff, everything is in-house. It's vertically integrated, so they don't have to work with somebody else's hardware like a Dell or a Lenovo having to run Windows. It's kind of a little bit like that, where one hardware has to be able to run multiple software and that sort of thing.
But he did bring up the point about the USB-C,
Mhm.
right? And he really feels that Apple needs to go to that
Yeah, and I
because
think they already are. Right. I
oh,
think,
are they?
yeah, I
But can
think
you
his point
imagine
was,
if all the phones had the same plug? That would be
yeah,
so nice.
right. And part of, in Europe, they already do that, right? It's the EU that actually mandates that. But I think we're more market driven. So I think that's already happening now.
Okay.
Apple initially had that big ugly wide connector on their phones, and then you
Yeah.
got to the lightning, and and to be fair, Android went through, so they went through the micro USB, then went to USB-C. So at some point you reach this level of goodness, like, okay, this is it. This is going to
Yes.
work from
Yes.
here on out. And I think part of the point is that the Tesla connector, the NACS, they got it right so early and so right that you really didn't
Right.
need to make any changes, right? So Apple's like, okay, well, we need to make some changes yet, but I think the Tesla
But we don't
connectors,
know what we don't know, and so it was good to have the two products. It's just too bad we couldn't have done this, a year or
a little bit
two
earlier.
ago.
So it's not all rainbows and unicorns, though, right? So what are some of the ramifications? Generic charging networks are now going to be competing with Tesla Supercharger network, right? So they're not going to go away. Everybody's not going to just start charging at Tesla Supercharger networks, right? That means that the Electrify Americas, the charge points, the EVgo's, the Blinks, they're all going to have to be competitive with Tesla now in terms of reliability, pricing, appealing locations, all that sort of thing. They're still going to be out there, which is good because we want
More places to
more
charge,
places to charge. What it also means is that they're going to have to more uniformly charge by the unit of energy and not by time.
and you've
And of
touched
course,
on that with a couple
yeah.
videos.
So
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere in some places, the utilities get in the middle of that. Fortunately, here in Michigan, that's not the case. So the MPSC has already ruled that for motor fuels, electricity can be resold. So there's no reason that anybody in the consumer's energy or DTE territory has to charge by the minute, because they are permitted to sell electricity by the kilowatt hour as a motor fuel. But where that's not the case nationwide, those utilities hopefully will follow suit. One other thing I want to talk about is the profitability, right? So who makes money on this? Do the charging networks really make money on marking up the electricity to the point where they can justify those high dollar installations? Or is really the profit incentive somewhere else? Everybody has to make money. Nobody can do this at a loss. I think one of the things that the charging networks need to look at is the whole charging experience. Think of it like the gas station. Gas stations don't make a lot of profit on gasoline. They make profit on the drinks, the snacks, the roller dogs, the
Okay.
alcohol,
Okay.
the cigarettes, the prepared foods. And, if you've ever noticed, there's hardly any pure gas stations left. It's all convenience stores. And they're getting bigger and bigger. So on the way to Kansas City recently, I noticed big travel centers like Buc-ee's or
Yeah.
Wally's or the
Yeah.
world's largest truck stop, right? The Flying J's, the Pilots. Well, so what happens is
I-80.
you run out of fuel, so you need to go get fuel, but then you yourself as a human, you need food, you need a restroom. And so what do? They make it super easy for you to get a giant big gulp, to get a $5 latte, to get prepared food. And by the time you're out of there, you've spent 20-30 bucks. The kids probably pulled some stuff out of the toy section. You got a t-shirt. There's one in Effingham, Illinois. There's a stop there. They get t-shirts says, "Where in the Effingham am I?" Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's where they're making the money. So I think the charging networks are going to have to get in alliance with those kind of locations. And that's happening already. We've seen like Pilot and I think Flying J, they've said they're going to start installing the Dunkin' Donuts
And I was just up in going up to Maine, and so some of their on the turnpike, their centers had Tesla chargers and a couple of the soon to be extinct chargers.
So the other thing is, Tesla's not completely off the hook here either. So I recently took a trip with my Zero motorcycle in tow. And so some of those charging stations also were not designed for trailers. The other thing that's going to be coming up here is every vehicle so far has their charging point in a different spot, right? And they're seeing some of that in Norway. If you look at some of Bjorn Nyland's, so Tesla Bjorn, if you look at some of his videos when they open the Supercharger network in Europe, which they can do because they all use the same connector, now suddenly you're having the VWs and Kias and everybody else charging, and they're not backing in the same way.
I think the discussion about drive-through chargers, all that, I think we really should dedicate do some more research into that. I know I had a discussion with somebody that wants to try to do an all electric with drive-through, so they're just like ordinary gas stations.
Right. So that's part of the experience. Again, pulling a trailer. I'm not the only one. They do have head-in spots at the Superchargers, most of them, but people don't even know what they're for. I literally came to a Supercharger with 12 chargers. One of them was being used, and it was the head-in charger. I was like, really? Are you kidding me? I'm here with a trailer, and you're using this. So I actually explained it to the guy, and he's like, oh, I had no idea, right? So we need a little bit of education. And again, pull-through spots. Sometimes when you pull into those head-in spots, your trailer is hanging out into a driveway
it takes up a lot. It takes up a lot of real estate, to make them. Yeah. But I think this would be the next step. Is can we just do like the gas stations do? Got to have islands that are all lined up, and you just drive through. Yes,
covered when it's raining.
Solar panels.
Solar
Why
panels.
Not? Solar panels.
Okay, so yeah, and we see in Europe they have some of these charging centers where it's just a much better experience. You go in, you got actually a decent coffee shop, and you have Wi-Fi, you have other things that you can do.
It's exciting. It's so exciting. All this good stuff that's coming.
Overall, this is in the direction of goodness. So the other thing, and again, 2-Bit Da Vinci mentioned this as well. So what about the Tesla owners are like, oh, great. Now everybody and their brother is going to be using the Tesla Superchargers, right? So now
you're the first one to bring that up. I didn't catch them talking about it.
He said that too. And
you guys have been pretty good though so far, I would say.
There was one time in my entire career, if you will, of driving Tesla since 2015 when I had to wait for a Supercharger. That was the Wednesday. Yep, in 8 years. So that was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I think it must have been like 2018. And we were heading from Michigan to Kansas City, and we're heading out of town, and it was St. Joe's, Michigan.
Oh,
and it's actually a pretty cool Supercharger. They have a Panera, they have some other burger stops, things like that. And I had to wait. There was actually a line. Right. So it's like, oh, great. Now I got to wait. And it was like a 10-minute wait. So it wasn't huge, but it was, it's annoying. So the family's going in, they're getting their meal. I'm sitting there making sure nobody else pulls into a spot. So it wasn't a year later, I think, I hope I'm getting this right, that they now opened the Benton Harbor Supercharger. And now, a couple miles away at a Meijer.
That's like 5 minutes away, right?
Yeah. So you have like a V3 or a V2, one of the 250 kilowatt superchargers. So now we never have that issue anymore. And actually we decide, okay, do we want to go to the Meijer and do a little bit of shopping?
And the app shows you, right? That
absolutely. The app shows you, or more importantly, your navigation screen shows you, right? And it will recommend which one you want, but you can override it.
Well, but now if I'm driving a Mach-E, will I get that, or I'm going to have to go off my app, right?
That's a great point. I don't know how they're going to handle that. That's a whole other discussion.
I think in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they will get this all integrated, but at least have it on our app.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you do have planning tools, right? You have PlugShare Trip Planner, which is a little bit manual. And you have a better route planner. But to have it integrated on your screen, of course, is kind of the holy grail. And that's also one thing that Tesla does very, very well, that they will actually tell you when you go from here to driving across the country, and it will say, well, we're going to recommend that you stop here, here, here. And this one is 10 minutes. This one's 15 minutes. That one's 20 minutes. This one is 50 minutes. And I'm usually like, I'm not stopping for an hour. And then they skip one of the Superchargers in their planning because, in their algorithm, probably it's the shortest timeline. And but I don't like that. I want to stop more often, and I don't want to sit there and charge that long. So you can override those things if you have those options.
That's a whole part that, if you don't have a Tesla, you don't understand, I think. Because, right,
Right.
I'm not familiar with the other cars having a good system that way.
I don't know the other cars, but I do know that a better
Does your
route planner. No, it does not. I mean, it'll find charges for you, but it's not like a planning tool where if you
Yeah.
plan, a trip that's way
So
beyond your
hopefully
range.
hopefully that comes with the app. That would sure be nice.
Well,
You know
in
what I
some
mean?
ways, the manufacturers have to differentiate themselves, and maybe somebody else will do that really well. Although I have to say, Tesla does it pretty well. One thing we didn't talk about was the fact that for NEVI funding, part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there are some minimum standards, and part of that is having a user interface. So, credit card billing and having a CCS connector. There was an
Oh yeah,
article,
yeah, yeah. You brought that up.
I believe it was in Reuters, that basically said, hey, the White House throws some cold water on the Tesla victory. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. The way that the superchargers are implemented right now, they probably wouldn't qualify for that federal funding. Now, they could tweak it to make it so that they do comply. The law could be changed. It's difficult to know how that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, Tesla already implements it without any subsidy now, or at least not
Right.
with that subsidy. There could be other subsidies, but not with the NEVI funding. So they're already doing it. So if they're making money, they're just going to keep rolling them out. So, if they can get other funding, then more power to them. But then they do need to be inclusive as far as being able to charge all vehicles.
The fact that Tesla did open this up to share with everybody. There's a couple of people I've heard said that was, they don't feel that was a smart business move. But I'm so glad that Elon has that, hey, what's better for society, not for my company.
Well, but I think it's both. I think it is a smart business move because, one of the things you can do is you can have tiered pricing. You can say, well, Tesla owners are going to pay this much per kilowatt hour, and other people are going to pay a higher tier. So,
Right.
and you can tweak that. That's the cool thing. You say, well, okay, people aren't using them. Okay, I'm going to change my pricing structure. Or maybe this weekend,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like Electrify America does this. Hey, it's Earth Day. Today's free charging or half price charging or whatever you want to do.
Okay.
And maybe you can roll it together with some other incentives.
And then
you
Elon,
go,
right, would open up all the chargers because there was a hurricane right down in
yeah,
Florida. Free charging for everybody.
right.
So that's so cool. Good stuff, man. I'm glad we got this. Let's do this again. I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed or learned from this episode of Zero E Michigan, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our YouTube channel for other related videos at youtube.com/@0E-Michigan.